Welcome back. I'm Dr. Cheek and I'm a licensed clinical psychologist, and today we're going to talk a little bit about modern relationships and the issues with modern relationships. Now, modern day relationships tend to seem either disconnected or superficial or non-existent today and can sometimes be very problematic. And I almost wonder, is relational intelligence the answer? And my psychologist's response to that is, it depends. So let's talk a little bit first about what is relational intelligence, the concept of relational intelligence. And more recently, I've seen a lot of posts, a lot of videos, a lot of information about relational intelligence as it relates to Esther Perel. And Esther Perel is a couples therapist that talks about relational intelligence. She talks about erotic intelligence. She talks about a lot of different aspects of the relationship. And she recently did a masterclass on relational intelligence. But when I initially saw the masterclass trailer and she made the statement that she feels like relational intelligence is more important than emotional intelligence, my first thoughts, without knowing anything, without researching anything or actually seeing anything, was that relational intelligence sounds like the concept of focusing primarily on the relationship or having a commitment to the relationship and not necessarily having a commitment to the partners in the relationship, but simply the idea of the relationship. But it also, for me, sounded like a business concept. And it sounded like a business concept because working in a corporate space, working in a business environment, you honestly learn that that adage is not about what you know, is about who you know, is a real thing. Because a lot of the opportunities you get in certain organizations are not based on your skill set. It's typically based on who you know and what you have access to based off of who you know in those spaces. And this is where networking or learning how to network and engage with people or form those business connections come into play. So that's what I initially thought. I was like, this has to be a business concept. But when I did research into Dr. Perel's thoughts about relational intelligence, the first thing I looked at was her master's class. And her master's class talks about things such as empathy, boundaries, self-awareness, cultivating intimacy, building trust, how to manage difficult conversations, how to avoid miscommunications, what are the power dynamics in a relationship, what are the roles in the relationship, how to resolve conflict, how to have better communication. Those are the things that she covered as it related to relational intelligence. And I was able to find a video that she did on relational intelligence, and she talked about it in terms of work relationships and personal relationships. And that was the most that I could find about her concept of relational intelligence or how she explains relational intelligence. And there are two things in this particular video that stood out for me. So the very first thing that stood out for me was that she made the note that she wasn't actually interested in the work environment. However, she was interested in the relational dynamics that exist. And those relational dynamics were like power, rejection, partnership, creativity, loyalty, interdependency, those type of relationship dynamics. And she made the statement that those relational dynamics exist in two places primarily for us, and that's at work and at home. She didn't make the statement, but I'm going to make the assumption that it's clear that those relationship dynamics are probably going to be very different at work than they are at home. They have some similar characteristics, but how you deal with work relationships and how do you deal with personal relationships or view personal relationships as opposed to work relationships are different. So that was the one thing. The second thing that stood out in this video was that she made reference or note to the idea that this is the only time where the work environment seems to care about your emotions, because most old school work environments didn't really care about your emotions. And she made note that they are tying your emotions to your performance status. And what I want us to be clear about is that in most business settings, the characteristics of a relational intelligence are less focused on you as an employee and more focused on those individuals that have a leadership role. And the reason why they're focusing on that as it relates to a leadership role is that what a lot of studies have found in the areas of business is that transformational leaders, motivational or influential leaders have the greatest impact on an organization, because they are the types of leaders that motivate their employees to work work, their employees are more productive, their employees report higher work satisfaction. Most of those types of leaders have a better working relationship with their employees, which in turn allows the employee to have more loyalty to the organization, be more productive, and feel more satisfied at work. So this is why those dynamics that seem to be related to emotion, which are more related to relations and connectedness, seem to be important in organizations today, because organizations benefit from them. It's not because they care about your emotions, but I digress. She talks about relational intelligence in those terms, but the concept of relational intelligence has been around for greater than 30 years. But the concept has been around in the realm of business. It focuses on the characteristics needed to be what we consider a transformational or a motivational influential leader. And there was a organizational psychologist who reports on their website that they've done 20 years of research on relational intelligence as it relates to leadership and in the work environment. And that's why it has the psychological terms or the emotional terms, because most of the time it's an organizational psychologist that's thinking about relationships and how do we utilize relationships to improve the work environment. This particular organizational psychologist that noted they had been studying relational intelligence for well over 20 years is Dr. Adam Bandeli. Don't quote me on his last name because I probably said it wrong. I may have said it wrong. If I did, I apologize. But his aspects of relational intelligence focus on things like establishing rapport or understanding others or embracing individual differences and developing trust. And he made it clear to kind of identify that we're talking about situational trust and cultivating influence. That's where the influential or motivational leadership comes in. So for me, the idea of relational intelligence as it relates to a business framework makes more sense. And that most relationships in business are transactional. There are no emotions connected to business relationships. It's about what can we do for one another? How do we benefit from being in this relationship with one another? What are our mutual goals as it relates to being in relationship with one another? We are connecting to each other because we can benefit from one another. That's the business role of relational intelligence. And it is transactional. It is you do this and I do this, and it operates in that way. And that makes sense in the business world. However, there are no emotional connections tied to that relationship. And most of us do not go to work to form emotional connections or emotional bonds or relational bonds with people that we have an emotional connection to. Now, are there times when we go into these work environments and we can form friendships, we can form love relationships? Yes. And when that happens, that's a happy accident. That's something that is just a product of proximity, and as a product of being close to one another and actually being able to communicate and get to know one another with this common interest of the work environment. And me, myself, some of my closest friends are former coworkers that I've known for more than 20 years. So these are things that we can form in a work environment, but that's not what we go to work for. And that's not what the concept of relational intelligence was looking at. So do I think relational intelligence can help solve the problem with modern day relationships? Again, my response is it depends. And it depends on how you're trying to utilize relational intelligence as it relates to personal relationships, not work relationships. When it comes to personal relationships, how I think relational intelligence can actually be beneficial is that it allows us to learn how to make connections. It gives us that framework to start building those connections again, because what we tend to lack in this current environment of social media, or online dating, of the internet, we tend to lack the ability to connect with people. We tend to lack the ability to have dialogue, to hold a conversation, to actually want to get to know someone, because we have this false sense that we can get to know someone by simply looking at their social media profile or running a background check on them or doing something online that will give us greater access to who they are as a person than just having a conversation with them. So in this current information-driven environment that we're in, we sometimes lack the curiosity to get to know someone, which is the foundation for any healthy relationship, is that we form that bond, we form that connection with a relationship partner in hopes to build off of that. Now, do I think relational intelligence is the solution for longevity in a relationship? Not necessarily. I think it's helpful for that initial connection, to form those bonds, learn how to have those conversations, to establish trust, to do those things that typically happen at the beginning of the relationship, and they can play a role throughout your relationship. However, I want us to be clear that sometimes when that's primarily what we're focusing on, sometimes even our personal relationship can become transactional. And this is what we want to avoid, is that our personal relationships become transactional, where we are in this relationship because you do this or you do this. And I think that's where modern relationships are struggling today, is because most relationships in the past were transactional. They were based off of the idea that one person was limited in one area and that other person was limited in another. So most of the time, most of our traditional marriages were based off of this idea that one person had the ability to make the money to be financially stable, or to allow someone else to be financially stable, or to have a family or household to be financially stable, while the other person had the ability to maintain a household, to cook, to clean, to provide emotional stability. Now those roles are interchangeable. And because those roles are interchangeable, we've lost that transactional piece that allowed relationships to maintain over the years, or to have longevity over the years. So because we've lost that transactional piece, we're now trying to figure out what's the new avenue to take to maintain a healthy relationship. And we may have to look for something a little bit more tangible, such as being able to say that we're wanting to maintain this relationship, and this is what we're hoping to get out of it. This is what we're going to work towards as a team as a way of maintaining the relationship. It may look like something that is less tangible. We make a solidified pact that this is the relationship that we have set for life. I don't think there's a one size fits all for any relationship, because we're all different, but we're trying to find our way in this modern world. So I think with modern relationships, we're going to have to kind of identify on an individual couple basis what the two of them can kind of think about as what is going to be needed in their foundation of their relationship that allows them to maintain that healthy relationship, because that transactional piece is no longer there, and that's causing a little bit of a struggle in these relationships. So what I hope you learn from today's video is that relational intelligence as a concept has been around for a pretty long time, and it's been around in the realm of like understanding what characteristics are necessary in a leader. And in the religious sense of the word, or in a transactional relationship, we tend to have someone who's in a hierarchy or in a leadership role, and that works. But in this current environment where those roles can be interchangeable, or those roles can be fluid, the ability to maintain relationships or to continue in the trajectory of the way old relationships used to maintain is a struggle. Do I think relational intelligence is a solution? Not necessarily. I think relational intelligence, like I said, is helpful for the initiation or the initial connectedness of a relationship, but I don't know if it will be the glue that holds a relationship together for the remainder of what a couple wants a relationship to be. I don't think it's the answer to maintaining a healthy relationship. I do think it's a solution for learning how to connect and build relationships again, because we have lost that as a skill as human beings. So get out there, get to know people, ask questions, be curious, figure out who you're wanting to be with, because right now the dating scene sometimes feel like a checklist. And sometimes you feel like when you're meeting someone, they're interviewing you for a new position on their team. And I don't know if that's the position you want to play in a relationship, but I personally don't want to be added to anybody's roster. So I don't want to be on the team. So I don't think most people want to be treated like a checklist. So this relational intelligence gives us the ability to actually learn how to connect with people and not maybe be so rigid with how we engage with one another. So as always, if you have any thoughts, questions, or comments, please leave them below. I hope you've learned something from this video today. I thank you for taking the time to listen, and I'll be seeing you again very soon. Thank you.